Captain Ryland Keyes leaned back in the command chair, his eyes fixed on the holographic projection flickering in front of him. The cold blue light from the control panels cast harsh shadows on his face, highlighting the lines of exhaustion etched deep into his features. The message had come in an hour ago, oddly encrypted, fragmented. But the last few seconds, though distorted, were unmistakable. Humans will hunt you down, never attack. Keyes ran a hand over his face, stifling a curse. His brow furrowed as his first officer, Lieutenant Mara Ishida, stepped beside him, her face as inscrutable as ever. She scanned the message in silence before speaking in her usual low, controlled tone. "Sir, this is unsettling. What do we make of it?" Keyes didn't respond immediately. The transmission had come from a region of space known as the Reaches, a place far beyond Earth's established boundaries. A location where even the most seasoned explorers hesitated to tread. The source of the message was unknown, but it was clear that whoever had sent it knew something about humanity. Could it be a mistake? Ishida pressed. Maybe just a glitch in the communication protocols? Keyes shook his head slowly. A glitch would be random. This feels deliberate. And this, warning, it's too specific. He glanced at the crewman manning the communications console. "Lieutenant, isolate the coordinates. I want to know exactly where this came from." The crewman nodded, fingers flying over the controls. "Aye, Captain. Coordinates coming through now." Keyes stood and paced, trying to keep his thoughts in order. The Galactic Council had tasked the Maverick with exploring these uncharted territories, but they had never anticipated this kind of warning. Not this soon. And certainly not with such ominous phrasing. He'd heard of alien species warning others about humanity's aggression before, but this felt personal. "Captain, we've got the coordinates," the crewman said, voice tight with tension. "It's from the outskirts of the Reaches, near the outer rim." Keyes stopped in his tracks. His gaze hardened as he turned to face Ishida. The outer rim was dangerous, a place where even the most cautious expeditions often ended in disaster. It was sparsely populated by both known and unknown species, and many in the Galactic Council considered it a no-go zone. "We have to investigate," Keyes said, his voice steady but resolute. "Prepare the crew. We're heading there." Ishida didn't respond immediately. She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing something unspoken between them. "Captain," she said finally, her voice softer but no less serious. "What if this is a trap?" "Then we'll be ready," he replied without hesitation. As the Maverick adjusted course, Keyes couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at the back of his mind. The warning hadn't been a vague message. It was a statement, clear and direct. And its implications were more troubling than he was willing to admit. Who had sent it? And why? These were the questions that would drive him, and the crew, into unknown space. Ishida stood at her station, monitoring the ship's systems, her usual composure bordering on cold. Keyes knew her better than that. She was an experienced officer, but even she was unnerved by the gravity of their mission. "You've been quiet," Keyes said, turning toward her. "What's on your mind?" She met his gaze briefly before returning her focus to the ship's controls. "I'm just thinking, if someone wants us to stay away from this region, it might mean there's something there we shouldn't know. Or worse, something we're not ready to face." Keyes studied her, his eyes narrowing in thought. "That's what concerns me. But we don't have the luxury of hesitation. We'll approach cautiously. No need to start a war we can't win." She didn't respond immediately. There was an unspoken understanding between them, an understanding that sometimes, there were no guarantees when it came to the unknown. "Understood," she said at last, though the flicker of doubt in her eyes remained. As they neared the coordinates, the tension on the ship was palpable. The crew members, usually calm and focused, exchanged looks of uncertainty. The Reaches had always been a mystery, a place for scientists and adventurers to explore, but also a graveyard for those who ventured too far. Keyes felt it then, the weight of the mission. The unknown could be deadly, and the warning they had received now loomed over them like a shadow. The ship's sensors pinged, alerting the crew to something massive on the horizon. Keyes' heart skipped a beat. A blip appeared on the long-range scanner, something far too large to be a simple asteroid. "Captain, it's not an asteroid," the crewman at the sensor station said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's a ship. And it's big, real big." Keyes took a step forward, his pulse quickening. "Lock onto it. All hands, prepare for possible contact." The Maverick drifted silently toward the unknown ship, and for the first time since receiving the warning, Keyes felt the weight of humanity's presence in this corner of the galaxy. The ship's purpose was unclear, its size and technology beyond their understanding. Was it a message? A threat? Or something else entirely? As they closed in, the ship's silhouette grew larger, more imposing. But it didn't move. Didn't speak. It just waited. The quiet before the storm felt suffocating. Keyes could feel the air thickening, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. And then, without warning, a new message blinked onto the ship's holographic display. This time, it was clear. Short. And as terrifying as the last one. "We warned you. It's too late." Keyes' heart froze. The Maverick was now a silent predator, moving ever closer to the massive alien ship that loomed before them. The vessel, larger than anything Keyes had ever seen, seemed to pulse with an eerie energy, as though it were alive. Its dark hull reflected the stars in fractured gleams, making it appear as if it were part of the very fabric of space itself. "Captain, they've locked onto us," the sensor operator's voice crackled over the comms. "Their weapons systems are active." Keyes clenched his jaw, the weight of the situation settling over him like a thick fog. This was no mere chance encounter. The warning had been more than just a message, it was a harbinger of something far more dangerous. He turned to Ishida, who was standing beside him, her eyes scanning the readouts with intensity. "This is it," Keyes muttered under his breath. They weren't playing games. Ishida's eyes flicked to the sensor array. "We've been warned. But we can't just turn around, Captain. The Council won't let us. We're the first humans to reach this far into the reaches. If we pull back now, it'll look like we're running from a threat we barely understand." Keyes' gaze hardened, a fire igniting in his chest. He didn't want to retreat. But the lives of his crew were on the line. What's the alternative? We've got no intel on them. No idea what they want. They've already made their intentions clear. And they're not talking. We need to approach with caution. Ishida didn't argue. She'd known this mission would be fraught with peril, but now, facing an unknown species with unknown motives, the stakes were higher than either of them could have anticipated. The warning that had come through just moments ago still echoed in Keyes' mind. "We warned you. It's too late. Keep your distance," Keyes ordered, moving toward the helm station. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of something darker, something that neither he nor Ishida could ignore. "No sudden movements. We wait for them to make the first move." The Maverick drifted, silent as a shadow, its engines humming softly beneath the tension. The alien ship remained motionless in front of them, its weapons primed but not yet fired. The stillness was suffocating. Keyes felt the pressure building in the pit of his stomach. Ishida's voice broke the silence. "Captain, we need to make a decision. Their weapons are ready to fire. If we don't act soon, they will." Keyes turned to face her, his expression grim. "And if we act rashly, we could provoke them. We've got one shot at this. One. It's not a matter of what they might do, it's a matter of what we're prepared to do. If it comes down to it, we won't hesitate." Ishida nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Understood, sir. But what if the message wasn't a threat? What if it was a warning? Maybe they just want us to leave." Keyes paused, considering her words. The truth of it was, they didn't know. They didn't have enough information. He glanced at the view screen again, watching the alien ship's silhouette in the distance. It was almost as if it were waiting, too. Waiting for something. What do they want? The silence in the control room deepened. Each second that ticked by felt like an eternity. Key's mind raced through every possibility: diplomacy, negotiation, a show of force, or an all-out attack. But none of it seemed right. He couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than just a routine contact. "Captain," Ishida spoke again, her voice tight, "they've opened a comm channel." Keyes turned sharply. On screen, the holographic display flickered, and a form appeared, its features alien and yet somehow eerily familiar. The figure was tall, its skin dark and smooth like polished stone, its eyes shining with a faint luminescence. Its voice, when it came, was deep and resonant, carrying an undertone of something ancient, something older than the stars. "Human captain," the figure said, its tone chilling in its precision. "You have ignored our warning. You have ventured too far." Keyes felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The message was no longer just a broadcast, it was a direct communication. They knew who he was. They knew his crew. "Ignore it at your own peril," the alien continued, its voice steady but heavy with a weight that felt like a sentence. "You are not prepared for the consequences of your actions. Leave now, or you will be hunted." The words hit Keyes like a physical blow. He could feel the room's atmosphere change, the air turning dense with the unspoken threat. The alien wasn't just speaking, they were warning. It was a declaration, not a negotiation. "Understood," Keyes said, keeping his voice as even as possible, despite the fear clawing at his chest. He motioned to Ishida. "Cut the channel." The alien's face flickered off the screen, but the unease lingered. Keyes turned to Ishida, his mind racing. "We're too close to back out now. We have to make a decision. Do we press forward?" Ishida met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw the uncertainty in her eyes. This wasn't a simple exploration mission anymore. It was a gamble, and the cost of losing could be catastrophic. The tension in the room thickened, the choice hanging in the air like a blade poised to fall. "We press forward," Key said finally, his voice hardening. "If they want to fight, they'll get one. But we're not leaving this place without answers." The Maverick surged forward into the unknown, the alien ship looming larger and more intimidating by the second. The crew held their breath, waiting for the storm to break. The Maverick crept closer to the alien ship, its hull now looming large on the view screen. Keyes stood at the front of the bridge, his gaze locked on the silent behemoth ahead. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with anticipation and unease. They had no idea what awaited them, no clear path forward, only the certainty that retreating wasn't an option. Ishida stood beside him, eyes scanning the readouts, her fingers twitching at the controls as if she were already anticipating an order. Her usual calm had shifted into a quiet resolve, but even she couldn't hide the apprehension in her eyes. "Captain," Ishida spoke, her voice sharp, "they're powering up again. Weapons are aligning. I'm not sure how much longer we can maintain this distance." Keyes gritted his teeth. His instincts screamed at him to pull back, to abandon this wild chase into the unknown. But every fiber of his being told him that doing so would be a mistake, one that might cost humanity far more than a failed mission. "We're not pulling back," he said, voice firm. "We're not running from them. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Lieutenant. We'll give them one more chance to communicate." The words felt hollow as they left his mouth. He knew deep down that the alien ship wasn't interested in communication. If they had been, they would have continued speaking, explaining their demands. But this was something else. This was a test of humanity's resolve. As if on cue, the alien ship's vast hull shimmered, and a massive beam of light lanced out from its center. It was no warning shot. It wasn't a signal to turn back. The beam of energy lashed across the darkness of space, a visible streak of raw power that illuminated the cold void around them. "Brace for impact," Key shouted, his heart hammering in his chest. The Maverick jerked violently as the beam struck its shields, sending tremors through the ship. The ship's warning klaxons blared, and Keyes could feel the strain of the shields under the barrage. The Maverick shuddered again as the energy pulse pulsed against them, their hull groaning under the force. Ishida's voice cracked through the chaos, her words cutting through the noise with sharp authority. Shields at 75%. We can't take much more of this, Captain. Redirect all power to the shields. Keyes barked. Get us out of here, now! The Maverick surged forward, the engines roaring to life as Ishida punched in the evasive course. The ship lurched, twisting and diving to the left as the alien ship fired again, this time, a series of rapid shots. The shots missed, narrowly grazing the edges of the Maverick's shields, sending bursts of energy sparking through the surrounding space like fireworks. The crew's faces flashed pale in the glow of the blasts, but Keyes barely noticed. His focus was on one thing, survival. We need to find out why they're attacking us, Keyes muttered, more to himself than anyone else. We need answers, fast. Ishida nodded, her hands moving with precision as she calculated their next course of action. We're taking damage, she said, her voice grim. Hull integrity's down to 80%. If we don't get out of their line of fire soon, we won't be able to keep the ship intact. Keyes gritted his teeth. He had no intention of retreating, at least not yet. Not while they were so close. But the alternative was clear, they could either continue this high-risk game of cat and mouse or take action and force the aliens' hand. Target their engines, Keyes ordered, his voice low and steady. We need to disable them, fast. We can't afford to be this close for long. A pause, then Ishida's voice, laced with uncertainty. Captain, it's risky. If we fire first, we might escalate things further. We don't know how they'll respond. Keyes felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He could feel his pulse quicken as adrenaline flooded his veins. The alien ship had already shown they were willing to strike without warning. They couldn't afford to be passive anymore. I'm willing to take the risk, Keyes replied, his voice hardening. Fire. Disable their engines. The tension on the bridge was suffocating as the weapons officer relayed the order. Keyes didn't wait to hear the response, he kept his eyes on the view screen, watching as the Maverick closed in. A moment later, the ship's guns roared to life, the force of the blast shuddering through the deck. The energy bolts streaked through space, hitting the alien ship's rear section. The beams exploded on impact, sending a ripple of visible energy across the dark expanse of space. But the ship didn't flinch. It didn't react as Keyes had expected. Instead, the alien vessel simply absorbed the hits, its exterior shimmering like liquid metal before the damage was repaired in an instant. Keyes stared in disbelief. What the hell? Ishida's voice trembled with shock. Their hull's regenerating. It's not taking damage the way we would expect. Their tech is, it's far beyond anything we've seen. The alien ship's response was immediate and brutal. A new wave of energy swept toward them, larger and more concentrated than before. This time, there was no time for evasive maneuvers. Full power to the shields. Keyes shouted, gripping the edge of the console as the bridge trembled under the force of the blast. The shields flared and crackled, holding firm for a split second before the Maverick lurched again, a violent tremor shaking the entire ship. Sparks flew from the consoles. The lights flickered, dimming to an eerie half-darkness. We're losing power, the engineer shouted, panic creeping into his voice. We've got damage to the reactor core. Not good enough. Keyes snapped, his voice hard as steel. Get us out of here. Now. Ishida turned to him, her face pale but resolute. They won't let us go. Keyes met her eyes, his mind racing with the implications of her words. They had just crossed a line, and now they were well beyond the point of no return. He gritted his teeth. Then we fight. The Maverick groaned under the strain of another barrage, its hull rattling violently as the alien ship unleashed a deadly pulse of energy. Sparks flew from the console, the overhead lights flickering, casting brief shadows over the tense faces of the crew. Keyes could feel the ship shuddering beneath him, but it was the weight of responsibility, not the physical tremors, that gripped his chest. Damage report. Keyes barked, his eyes darting from the view screen to the status readouts. We've lost forward shields, Ishida replied quickly, her voice tight with barely contained panic. Hull integrity is at 50%. Reactor output is unstable, we need to get out of their range or we won't make it. Keyes didn't flinch. His knuckles were white against the command console, his mind racing. There was no retreating now. They couldn't outrun the alien vessel, it was too fast, its technology too advanced. They were cornered, and any wrong move now could cost them everything. Bring us in closer. We'll use the asteroid field as cover, Keyes ordered. Ishida, get those shields back online, or we're done for. Ishida nodded, quickly inputting commands. Aye, Captain. But the core's already strained. If we push it too hard. Do it, Keyes interrupted, his voice hard. We don't have a choice. The ship jolted as the engines flared to life again. The Maverick lurched forward, threading its way through a scattering of asteroids. Keyes watched the asteroid field on the view screen, trying to calculate how long it would take for the alien ship to get a lock on them again. Their options were running out. Captain, they've begun pursuit, Ishida reported, her voice strained with effort. They're not stopping. They've locked onto our trajectory. Keyes gritted his teeth. He knew they couldn't hide forever. The alien ship's weapons would soon be back online, and with each passing second, their chances of survival diminished. Brace for another pass, he said. Steady the ship, and get me a targeting lock on their engines. Locking now, the weapons officer called back. But Captain, we're not guaranteed a hit. Their shielding is unlike anything we've seen before. Keyes met Ishida's eyes, and for the briefest moment, they shared the weight of the situation. The fate of their crew rested on a single, decisive move. They had to stop the alien ship, or they would never leave this sector alive. Don't miss, Keyes said, his voice low and dangerous. The ship vibrated again as the alien vessel fired once more, but this time, the Maverick was prepared. They dipped to the right, narrowly avoiding the blast, and the asteroid field became a shield, absorbing some of the impact. The Maverick veered around an asteroid the size of a small moon, its hull groaning under the stress. We've got a narrow window, Ishida said, sweat beading on her forehead. Engines at 65% power. The asteroid field won't hold forever. Keyes nodded, his gaze locked on the alien ship. The vessel had already adapted, realigning its weapons for another strike. The Maverick couldn't afford to dodge forever. They needed to land a hit, something that would give them a fighting chance. Fire! Keyes shouted. The ship's guns erupted in a series of blinding flashes, the projectiles tearing through space toward the enemy ship. Keyes watched the shots streak past, his heart in his throat as the missiles crashed against the alien ship's shields. The resulting explosion was momentary, a mere flare of energy before the shields reformed, untouched. Damn it! Keyes muttered under his breath. We need to find their weak spot. The alien ship fired again, a concentrated pulse aimed directly at their starboard side. This time, Keyes wasn't quick enough to avoid it. The beam cut through the space between them, raking across the ship's exposed flank, sending another violent tremor through the Maverick. Shields down to 30%, the engineer yelled. We're barely holding together. Keyes' jaw tightened, his mind racing for a solution. He couldn't afford another hit like that. They were out of time. Ishida, he said, his voice suddenly cold and resolute. Prepare to breach their hull. We're going in. Get us as close as possible. Ishida blinked in shock. Captain, you can't be serious. If we get any closer, we'll be vaporized before we even get within boarding range. We don't have a choice, Keyes said, his gaze unwavering. We need answers. And if we don't take action now, they'll finish us off. Get us close, Ishida. We're not going down without a fight. She hesitated, but only for a moment. Aye, Captain, she replied, her hands moving across the controls with renewed determination. The Maverick surged forward, threading between asteroids, getting dangerously close to the alien ship. Keyes braced himself as the ship lurched again, feeling the weight of every move, every breath. They were in the belly of the beast now, and there was no turning back. As they closed the gap, a sudden realization hit Keyes. They had no idea what they would find once they boarded the alien ship. They had no idea what kind of enemy they were truly facing. The threat of destruction hung over them like an inescapable storm. And yet, as the Maverick closed in on its target, Keyes felt a surge of something else, something burning deep within his chest. This wasn't just a mission to explore the unknown. It was a fight for survival. A fight for humanity's place in the stars. The ship shuddered again, the alien vessel's pulse weapons firing once more, but this time, Keyes' focus was clear. "We take them down," he muttered to himself. "This is our fight." And as the ship closed in on the alien target, the final gamble began.